Great, great. All right, let's get started for day 4 of the OpenSIPS Summit 2020 Distributed. So we're more than halfway through at this point, and I don't know about the rest of you guys, but it feels like my brain's going to explode. We've had so much good content, but let me tell you, at the beginning, I had planned a lot of kind of transitions and was going to show some movies, things like this, thinking that there wasn't going to be much discussion between the presentations. But guess what? You guys haven't let me any time to do this, which is amazing. I'm so impressed by all the questions and the interactivity with the community and everybody that's been a part of this summit. You've made it amazing so far. Keep up the amazing work. So today, we're going to have 3 more presentations. We're going to be hearing from Shlomi Gutman from Voicenter and Vlad Paiu from the OpenSIPS project. They're going to be talking about Jwt Authentication in UC today. They'll be our kickoff. Vlad, Shlomi, you guys are here?
Yep.
So without much further ado, let's get this day rolling. Day 4 of the OpenSIPS Summit starts with Vlad Paiu and Shlomi Gutman.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is going to be a joint presentation. Both me and Shlomi will be doing the talk. So feel free to introduce yourself, Shlomi.
Yeah, I'm Shlomi. I'm in the community and the nodes for around. I'm one of the owner and the CTO of Voicenter. Voicenter is a cloud VoIP provider, one of the first contact cloud VoIP provider. We are around 130 employees located all around between Israel, Ukraine, and our joint venture with Alex over Houston. So it's a great time here and a great place to say again thank you for you guys for the OpenSIPS project and giving us this wonderful technology to play around.
Yeah, I can see you love OpenSIPS. So I'm Vlad Paiu. I'm an OpenSIPS developer, and I don't know, maybe some of you know me. I've been coding, building, integrating OpenSIPS platforms for more than 10 years now. It's been a fun ride. Hope it continues. So let's see what you are going to go through today. We're going to first talk about what the issues are with the current, let's say, regular digest authentication and what are the current limitations. We're going to go a little bit through what's JWT and how we can authenticate using that, and how we can use the dedicated module for it, the auth JWT module. And then Shlomi will take you through some actual use cases with some other projects and some authentication providers. So let's get to it. Let's see what's the problem with digest authentication. Well, first of all, as the name says, it's just regular authentication. It's not giving us any support for authorization, which of course there are options out there, AAA options, diameter, radius, whatever, but digest is just authentication, and sometimes it kind of sucks. By default, it's using MD5, which I guess all of us know it's not secure for quite some time now. I know there are RFCs and initiatives to migrate it to SHA 256, but it's not yet there. Another thing that's really bad is that there's no safe way for third-party integration. I guess we've all had times when you try to integrate the OpenSIPS subscriber table responsible for digest authentication with other, let's say, tables, whether it's asterisk or free switch tables. It's always it's another way, so it's really bad as there's no standard for it. And the last point, I guess, is the most important thing which brought us to the JWT type of authentication is that there's no ability for single sign-on. And this gets really obvious when you go into a WebRTC type of environment where you have, let's say, a client logging into your web platform with his web credentials, and then when that client tries to use the SIP part, the WebRTC part of your platform, you will have to give him some other credentials and then try to make some sort of connection between those. And you end up doing a double authentication, and it's ugly, and it's definitely not the way to go forward. So let's see what is this JWT. It's short for JSON Web Tokens, and it's an RFC specified in RFC 7519. It's essentially a short method of representing claims securely between two parties. And essentially, it's joining of three base64 encoded strings. One is the header. The header contains some metadata about the type of the token. I have, let's say, decoded JWT over here. And this is the header. It just says that the type is JWT and that the signing of it is done with SHA-256. So we'll get a little bit back to the signature. And the second part of the token is the actual payload, which essentially is a JSON containing a set of claims that are verifiable by the receiver of the JWT. So again, the claims are represented in a regular JSON format. Over here we have subscriber ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the name, Dr. Evil, and you can essentially have anything you can dream of over here. And the last part, at the end, is the signature. It's used to validate the token and ensure that it's trustworthy and nobody has changed the payload or the header of it. Because how the signature is built, it's basically a hash over the base64, the header and the payload. So while anybody receiving a JWT token can read it and see what's the header and the payload, only if you know the secret over here, you can verify that the token is authentic and that nobody has changed it since it was issued till it reached you. So essentially, this is the mechanism that we are going to use for authenticating it. And unfortunately, there's no there's no RFC standard for this. It's currently draft and unfortunately not updated for more than 1 year. But what the draft says about how the protocol should work is that the client, let's say, authenticates on your web platform, and after with his web credentials, and then he gets a token from the service, from your service, this access token over here, and then it uses that token for all authentication purposes within the SIP platform. And what the, let's say, the draft specifies is this new bearer type of authorization. For old MD5 type authorization, it was digest, and now we have bearer. And afterwards, it's after bearer comes the JWT actual access token that the client received. And then it's up to the registrar to take that JWT token and validate it and make sure everything is okay. If all is good, give the user access to the SIP part of the platform. And the module that the registrar in OpenSIPS is using for doing this is, of course, auth JWT. Here we have just a short trace done over secure WebSockets of user agent registering with JWT. We see here the authorization header, bearer, and then a token. So let's talk a little bit about the JWT module. First of all, thanks a lot to Shlomi and Alex. They've been the main sponsors of this module, and they've helped a lot in testing it and troubleshooting and making it actually work. So the module is DB driven, and the main information is stored in two tables. One is JWT profiles, and the other is JWT secrets. This is how the profile table looks like. the main identifier, let's say in a way equivalent to the subscriber username, is this tag over here that identifies the JWT profile. And then we have as a mandatory field the SIP username, because in the old, let's say, Digest Authentication method, we had the actual SIP username over there, so we know there was a connection somehow. But in the JWT authentication, the token is all that we have. So essentially, we need a way to enforce a token holder to only use a specific SIP username in our platform. So this is how the SIP username token comes in handy. And afterwards, similar to how you could, I mean, the OpenSIPS script writer could make the subscriber table more verbose by adding various columns that you can use in your script. The auth JWT module has the same mechanism of specifying extra columns that can be loaded via the load credential mod parameter over here. So by setting the load credentials parameters, you will have the profile info, this column over here, loaded at script level. And of course, you can have as many such columns as you want. Just separate them by column over here, and you'll get them automatically propagated to the script level upon successful authentication. And the second part is, of course, the Jwt Secrets Table, because for validating a JWT, we need the secrets to make sure that all is good on the signature part. Let's say, between the profiles and the secrets, there is a one-to-many relationship, meaning that one profile can have multiple secrets assigned to it. And they are linked via the tag column over here. This secret column has the actual secret that will be tried to be used when decoding the JWT to make sure it's valid. And we also added an easy way of expiring JWT tokens, since you have two Unix timestamps over here, a start and an end. So the secrets are, when they're tried to decode the tokens, they're also verified that they're not expired. So let's say the main function that is exposed by this auth JWT module is the JWT authorize one. It essentially takes three parameters. The first one is an input parameter, and the other two are output ones. The first parameter is the actual token that you want to check if it's valid. And when you call it, what OpenSIPS will do is it will just look inside the token and try to validate it. And what I mean by this is, let's go a little bit back. If we go back to the profiles, we see our tag was in this example space monkey. And over here, in an actual example of the JWT, we see that our space monkey tag identifier is specified in the ISS claim of the payload. So we need to inform the auth JWT module that our tags are located in the ISS claim from the JWT. And this is what this mod param over here does. And now that the module knows where to get the tags, it's just a matter of a little bit of scripting. So we check, we should check if the authorization header is a bearer one, so we don't, by mistake, try to authenticate digest requests via this. We extract the token, and we call the authorize function. So then OpenSIPS will just go to the database, load all the secrets associated with Space Monkey in this case, and try one by one all the secrets associated with it. And obviously, in case there's a secret that can be used to successfully validate the JWT, it means that the token was valid and that we can trust that this authentication in our platform. And the other two parameters are let's say, used for output. The second one is the decoded token, because sometimes it is useful to also, let's say, inspect the token at the OpenSIPS level. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And we also have the SIP username, which we can use to verify if the let's say the user agent is sending us a proper SIP username associated with that tag. And obviously, they're not sent as parameters, but we also get those extra columns that we specified as load credentials further up. So we also have those automatically loaded. So that's in short how the actual authorization works. And what's nice about it, remember in the beginning we said that Digest Authentication is just a means for authentication. Well, for JWT it's a little bit different, since it can also be a very handy means of authorization. Like in this example over here in the payload, I have PSTN dial set to true. And since we have validated the token, it means that the server is the one that actually sent us this token, and so we can essentially trust whatever is in the payload. So we can trust that this user that we've just authenticated via JWT can dial to PSTN in this case. So it allows us an easy way to enable, disable various features within the platform on the spot, without having to do any, let's say, provisioning changes. So that's about it, what I wanted to talk on the actual OpenSIPS part, and Shlomi will walk you through some use cases and more integrations further on. I guess we'll take questions at the end, probably.
Yeah. No? Oh. So generally, like the mask in the COVID mask, it's important to use it in the right way. So also the way of using the JWT is can be done in multiple ways. Can you see my screen, right?
No, we don't see your screen.
Oops. Share. Second. Yeah. You see my screen now? Can you see my screen? Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
So I will try to talk a little bit about the different type of implementation and the different usage that we are finding to the JWT authentication. I must say it's like opening a new level of integration and communication between the world of SIP and other worlds as of web and integrations and cloud provider. And I will try to do some of those different implementations and later also show like a small demo that we build how to use it.
Shlomi, sorry to interrupt you. Just you're breaking up a little bit and quite scratchy.
I think it might be the microphone. I mean, I don't think it's an internet issue.
I'll get in my headphones.
Yeah.
Maybe connect with a cable, or if you're using Wi-Fi, maybe that's the problem.
No, it sounds like some issue. Probably it's using the built-in microphone from the laptop, which in 99.99% of the cases they do suck. You see, that's why it's all the time. It's good to have a lovely brother.
Exactly.
A lovely brother. Sorry.
I don't understand your use of "lovely" in that phrase.
No, it was actually
No
like
loving,
loving.
no loving.
Sorry.
And now can you hear me a little bit better?
A little bit better, yeah.
Yeah. Better. All right.
Lights went out, I think.
It's getting dark in here.
It's better now, or
No, I think it's the same.
it's the same?
Sounds like packet loss, really, because it's kind of.
Yes. Oh. Vlad, you want to take it from here? I will try to connect from a different one in a few minutes.
Vlad?
We
Vlad?
actually have some questions on the channel, so
Yep.
maybe if
Yeah, sure. Let's take some questions.
Shlomi.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Am I
Yeah.
sounding good?
So there are questions from Brett Nemirov. First question was, is this mechanism standard enough to see in the wild yet? So basically, I guess.
Yeah, it's standard enough in the sense that Shlomi took care to leave breadcrumbs all around. So there is support in the JSIP library for this. But obviously it's not that standard. I think that Janus also has some support for this, but since it's not an RFC, it's not yet fully supported all around. But PJSIP and Janus's starters is good enough, let's say.
Okay, that's a good answer. There are some more. Let's see. He also, Brett asks about revocation expiration process. If you have any more details of how it works, I suppose.
So on the OpenSIPS side, the only, let's say, expiration type is the one done via those two, let's say, columns of start timestamp and end timestamp. So that's how you can, let's say, make the columns, the secrets expire. But obviously, you can also, let's say, revocate them from the web server level simply by switching. I mean, having the token generator switch the keys with which they're signing the JWTs, and that's in that way all the secrets that OpenSIPS knows become invalid.
Can you hear me now better?
Yep.
Yeah, good. So I will share my screen. So you with me? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Sorry for the delay. So generally, we will talk about the different way of using JWT, how we implement it, and what are the different kind of applications that we have been able to generate by doing this integration. I must say it's really like a very open-minded thing because it's giving us the ability to do a lot of integration that are not basic SIP integration. So this is something that really help us doing a lot of other applications. All right, so the first basic integrations and application where we are using the JWT is when we want to put our phone inside of a third party like a CRM or ERP, or even like doing like a click to call button for the customer in a customer care portal, or any other kind of way of authenticating the SIP level based on other authentication. For a basic implementation that we are doing now is also putting inside of a lean phone, inside of our mobile application. When you are logged into your mobile, you already generate this JWT, and then you have a SIP registration that also going with some of those push information and other stuff. And of course, we have some clients using it as online games integrations to embed the video sound conferencing inside of the game. Another way in places where we are finding it very important to use it is where we have a huge amounts of potential users that might register to the system, and we cannot get all of those millions of records, or we might not even know all of them. It might be customers that join in our conferencing system, and it's the first time that are doing any interaction with our system. And then we are having the ability to do a secure registration with them based on their registration to a third party like Google or Outlook, Microsoft, or anything like that. And of course, about customers that have a very short period of time and we don't want to even register them, but we do want to authenticate them. So this is another way that we are using it. And another important thing that Vlad was saying, by getting another level of authorization and not only authentication, we can limit a lot of the permissions and manage which kind of activity we want to give this registration to do. So if we have like in call center, we are using this to see who can eavesdrop, whisper, who can connect to other agent calls, and who is like a simple employee that is not allowed into eavesdrop the CEO or something like that. So all of that information can be set inside of the JWT that doing the authentication, and we don't need to have any third party integration to know if this call could be made or if this activity could be going or not. Of course, as Vlad was saying, PSTN limitation, international calls limitation, also IP-based restriction, to have like some kind of list of subnets that allowed to connect to this IP and other places you are with this token, and with other IPs you are not being able to do anything like that. Conferencing room restriction, as I was mentioning before, making sure that each one can connect only to his conference and allow to see if he's allowed to share his screen or not sharing his screen, and other stuff. Of course, we cannot talk about JWT without generally speaking about SSO. Single sign-on, I like to call it triple SO. It's like a SIP single sign-on, the ability to get connected without any username and password, just by the ability to integrate to a third party that already you're being authenticated in front of him. It's saving a lot of headache on the IT department and the user that need to remember all of the different passwords. And of course, it's limiting the expose to client passwords or third party that should not be seen those information. So this is another great thing. There was a lot of demand for it in the SIP world, and it's something that our client and especially the IT departments that were of our customers really happy that we have. Another thing, another kind of permission that it's important to talk about is about the ability to set the permission over the third party. So let's say, for example, I'm connecting now to through Google, so I will get the access to this client contact list. So I will be able to do also caller ID to caller name, finding his caller name by the contact of these customers, displaying like in our software the contacts list from your Google account or from Microsoft Active Directory or any others, or the exchange contact list of the organization. And another way of getting permission is like by the end of the call, taking the recording of the call. And this is something that like we are passing through to the media gateway, this token, and is being able after the call to store a record of this call over the specific drive or storage or bucket of this client depends on where he did the login through. Another way that a lot of our customers ask us to do is to get on the end of the call to create an entity to this client that we just talked to, and even give a link to the record and everything over the permission that you already got once the client did the login to the soft phone or any other phone that he is using. So a lot of those third-party integration is being based over auth protocol, auth mechanism. It's like a mechanism being pretty much industry standard to give a third party the ability to authenticate and use your and like replacing the needs of giving credentials to a third party application that want to do something in front of a different one. So generally the flow is between this client that's asking the local application, and then the application is telling the client to go authenticate this in front of this authentication provider, and then the authentication provider usually through a redirect will give the application itself is the token, which with him you will be able to do all of the activity and the authentication and everything. So, for example, for the flow, if we have a joke, it's a great client of us that is coming to us and say, hey, Voicenter, would like to make a call and save it as a record. Then we are telling him, great, let's go to Google and ask for permission for it. And then we are we're asking as Voicenter permission from Google. Hello, Google. I have a user that would like to make a call and save his record on your storage. Can you give me a token for this request? And then Google will give us this token that we will give to the client, and then the client will go to Google and actually get this authentication. And then after that, when the user coming back to us with the approval and the token and everything, we can see that the call is really the token is really the token that he gave us, and then we can make the authenticate is to make the call. Like we will check by the public keys of the certification of Google to see if this token is okay. And when the client will send the register with this token, we will give him 200 super okay. And after the call will be ended, we will be also being able to ask Google to store this recording with this token. So this was a quick brief over authentication flow, and so we will talk about how do we make this SIPK recipe. What is the secret ingredients and how does it's working? And I was trying to make a very simple low-word application that doing all of the great stuff that we discussed about moving the authentication between Google and the user. So what is the recipe? What are the different things we need to put in there? So we need one HTML page to be the phone. We need one login form. We need different three very simple JavaScript function. I know most of you are not web developers, but I will try to give it in a very, very clear way of like one function getting the configuration, one function doing the register, and one function doing the call. And we need to have some kind of a web server backend with auth login mechanism. Each one might use his own backend technology. I was trying to give like a very, very simple example of how to do it with Node.js, but for sure it can be done with dozens of other programming languages, each one will prefer his own language and his own libraries that implemented it. Most of the time, you are not implementing all of the logic by yourself, but using some of those already been libraries that implement it to the auth mechanism based on the language you are writing in. And another thing we will need to have is to make to register as a auth in front of one of the auth provider. We will need to have an application, and we will need to store some signature in front of the database to make sure that we can verify the Google JWT by their public signature. So let's go over the different ingredients. So this is a very, very complex login form. I don't think you need to know HTML to understand that there is one button in here that's going in to connect to Google URL. And then we have the phone. It's a very, very fancy phone. I did a lot of designing on it. You can see there is a button register and a call button. And we are actually including the JS libraries which already been implemented with the Jwt Authentication and the authentication header in their implementation over the code. So what we do is give a basic token parameter. So let's look how does it look from the INBC. Again, as I was saying, we are using JS SIP. You can see that first we are doing getting the configuration. And when we are hitting the register, actually is getting the config from this function. And inside this token, we pretty much, the only thing that fancy over here is that we are taking from the URL, from the search bar, we are taking the token parameter. So we are taking the token from the get parameter inside of the token and parsing it inside of the authentication JWT parameters that the configuration of the JS SIP is having. And after we are getting the configuration, initiating our great new soft phone based on JS SIP, we are just letting him know to start. And when we're doing the start, is actually sending the register request that we could see it actually later in the example. After that, we'll be able to do a call button. Generally, nothing fancy about the call function. It's all what he's doing is taking this UA object that we just declared over here on the register and telling him call, and he will call to this URI. Of course, you can control if you want to send the media SDP audio or also video over the SDP. And another thing that it's a little tricky in here, you need to tell him, like when the call is being connection and when you starting get a stream, to make sure that you are passing this stream into your authentication, into some audio elements that will play. And actually, I don't know why. It could be thinner. You can see over here, you have after it, we are doing play to the audio, and then we will be able to hear the actually sound. The last part that it's not trivial, it's doing some kind of a backend. Again, I'm using Node.js with the Fastify library, which give us a very light, nice scale web browser, web server. And generally, you can see that most of the logic is being in here. Beside like loading the Grant module, which is a library who manage the auth integration for us, Beside loading it with this config file that we will go over it in a second, we are not doing too much besides saying over here, if we have a session with a grant with already the grant response that we got, then we need to go into the to the phone HTML and put over the URL the token. Otherwise, go into the login page. So beside that, we can see that are we going to Google to register as a client ID? So you actually need to go to Google Console for developers, and over there, over the credentials, adding a new web login to a web. Few important things about this page. First of all, we are getting the client ID and the client secret for this integration, and we will actually will use it later on inside of the configuration. And we need to make over here the list of the URL that are going to be provided, that are giving us that they will be able to access to this integration. And we have a list of the callback, what are the URL that are being able to get the information back from Google when we are redirecting the client after the authentication. And the config.js, as you see, the only thing that we need to tell pretty much about the Google information. By the way, the grant library is having a few dozen, even I want to say almost 100 different authentication provider that you can use. So each one can implement his own provider, and each provider get some different credentials that you usually will need to set up once you are registering in front of this suit provider, like we are seeing over here in front of Google. Another thing that we will do is pretty much over the scope, we will declare which kind of authentication we want to get from Google. And by this authentication, we are giving the client is giving us permission to do different activity inside of his account. So basically, it's OpenID and email giving you the basic credentials. I'm also like to ask like for the user aliases, if you have a different aliases. And of course, if you want to do like get rid over his contact or any other permission, you can go over Google documentation. There is like hundreds of different scope that you can see over there. Another thing that you are actually getting over here when you are downloading the JSON, you are getting this URL of Google for who give you the different certificate. And those are actually the certificate which are set up inside of the secret for the JWT authentication, so we can authenticate without going back to Google as the RFC suggests to us, but we can do a shortcut and already authenticate those tokens just by those secrets. So that's generally the basic way of how to do it. Again, we will need to make a folder with all of those 5 files. Start a new NPM project, installing those basic NPM libraries that we are using, installing those files, doing the create Google authentication, and import the Google JWT inside of your OpenSIPS JWT secrets. And of course, running it, as we can see, it will give us some kind of a login page that when we will do a submit, it will give us like this Google sign-on page, and then will redirect us into the phone, which we are having the ability to register and make a phone, and we will be able to see like how does the phone is look like. And then it's the register being sent with the authentication barrier and everything. And from OpenSIPS side, we can see it's actually getting the call. And over here, we are doing like a basic UAC replace from to change actually the email of the user from the what we got inside of the OAuth, inside of the JWT email parameters of the body. So this is generally, and of course we can see also we are adding inside of the header the OAuth username and your email that you authenticate with. So that was a quick overview of how making your own JWT implementation. I guess this is time for questions.
Okay, thanks, Shlomi. Yeah, I think we have and Vlad too. And by the way, there are some people who are very interested in doing this type of tests as part of OpenSIPS. So maybe when next time we do it, they will already have some kind of RFC, and we can ask you to help us to test it. Anyway, there is a question from Brent again. It says, what is recommended way to persist the payload metadata throughout the dialog, or is it expected that the payload arrive on every new transaction?
So generally, by the RFC, it's pretty much expecting it only over the register, but different application, you know, it's still like a pretty flexible area. So if you are loading all of the credentials and everything by the registration, so you not must send it on each invite or on each other transaction, but generally, as we implemented it inside of JSIP, it's actually sending it on each transaction, on each request that you are doing, even if it's in a mid-dialog transaction.
I see. Hopefully, it answers the question. Is it going to add a delay? What kind of usual delay you have? Say from Google, what is
so
kind of
again, if we are using the certificate in the way that we implement it inside of the module, so you are putting the public signatures of Google over OpenSIPS, then we are talking about far lower than 1 millisecond, because it's all what it's doing is a very quick OpenSSL decrypt that's making sure that this is the real signature. So I want to say lower than 1 millisecond. Vlad, you have a better guess?
Oh, okay, so it basically is not calling external services during transaction.
By the way, I have a big, I didn't like that the RFC by default say that, all right, when the SIP registration getting now go to a third party to do a HTTP request. I think it's like not understanding the way that real-time communication and a telco and a VoIP and a telco operation working, which are very mission critical, and we could not allow ourselves to have more delays or more point of failure. And I think the right way of doing it is actually making sure you have the public keys of those who signed in those JWT. And it's definitely a good practice to use private and public signatures. For sure, Google will not give you their private signatures. You could be very rich if you have them.
I see. Does those certificate expire, so you have to update them periodically? What is
so actually, as I was showing earlier, there is a web service that you are going into it, and you are just getting the certificates. So you can do some kind of a backend process that maintain that get the update signatures and update them to the DB. I don't know, like from the last few weeks that I'm playing with it, I didn't saw Google change once their certificate, but yeah, it's probably a good practice to have some kind of a backend process that once a day or once every few hours asking from Google to see if they got crazy and change one of their certificates or something.
Oh, I checked the certificate and they expire this month, so probably I guess it's a monthly renewal or something.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Monthly renewal, then it basically probably needs some automatic mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
I have a question, guys.
yeah, of course.
Regarding the security, it's not, there is no refresh token. So how do you deal with that internally? If the user changes the password, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. So again, anyway, the refresh token is an important implementation that probably should come from the client side anyway. And when you are doing like the registration, actually, I was showing over here like that you are setting up. When you are setting up your, no, you don't see it in here, it's cutting off, but when you are declaring over Google, you can say how many hours you want it to be alive and you have the ability to like refresh the token from the client side. So for sure, let's say the refresh interval of the token from Google must be lower than the registration timeout of the SIP. But anyway, like we are doing today, probably registration, most of the people around 1 minute and to 10 minutes. And so, yeah, once in a while, client side is supposed to go to Google and do a refresh over his JWT with the refresh token that he's getting once he's logging in. Of course, this HTML demo doesn't really have that. But
you can, by the way, you can enforce a rainbyte from OpenSIPS, and then you can force the re-registration.
Yeah. But anyway, like you must get in front of Google to refresh your JWT. Like one of the things that you have inside of Google JWT is the expiration, and it will be lower than the total expiration of the permission. So you probably get in like half an hour or an hour, and then you will need to refresh it by the time that is updated.
One more question maybe regarding to this also. How you can force a user logout? Because even if you delete the JWT token from the browser side, if it's not expired, it's valid. How can you deal, or have you faced situations like this?
Generally, like again, the idea is that until like the user is log out, but I guess again, like if you will log out, then you will not be able to refresh your token. So the default expiration will be by the JWT expiration. So even if you left it behind, I would say it's not a smart thing to put the JWT token as I did inside of the get, like near, because then the browser will put it in your history, and it is something that you shouldn't save nowhere public, you know. And if you are getting out from the browser, it should already delete it. So.
Okay.
There is Google like giving you the ability to revoke a permission that you already gave to an application, but again, it's probably just make sure that you are deleting the token from the place where you are using it, and then you are not using it anymore. Like
But if you want to disable a customer for a reason, or disable a service for a customer, it's not possible until
then again, you need to make sure that the server know about this customer that you are not using it. For example, like make sure you are changing his profile, his SIP user, or change his profile over the JWT profile tables. So you have a bunch of abilities of doing it. This is more of like example of a short POC. Of course, there is a lot of mechanism you should add over it when implementing it over production.
Okay, thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry for the bandwidth problems.
That's okay, that's okay. We still have another question out here. Does OpenSIPS inherently support revocation?
Again, with OpenSIPS can...
Does OpenSIPS inherently support revocation?
Again, it's something you will need to do from the client side. So if you are need to recreate the JWT, you will do it from the client, and then OpenSIPS will be able to authenticate it. OpenSIPS will reject all JWT if it will be expired, but the ability of regenerating it need to be probably done from the client side. You can do it also from server side, but it doesn't make any sense for you to do communication of behalf of the customer to Google. You will probably, it's not so secure for the clients to send this refresh token anyway to OpenSIPS. So I don't think it's like the best way of doing it, but it's something that should come from the client side probably.
And then do you have any recommended expiration time for the tokens?
Again, it's very depends over the use cases. Like as for, to give example for the last question, if it's something that you will want, if someone not being able to regenerate a new one to log him out, it depends of the use case, but I would say no more than the maximum length of a call. That is around 2 hours in our industrial, like 2-3 hours. So I wouldn't put it much more than that.
I think it's best practice for JWT to be in minutes, not in hours, for the reasons we spoke before.
Exactly. Yeah. No. That's what I'm saying. Like we have like integrations where we need to do stuff in the end of the calls and stuff like that, and then we will say, all right, that will be the expiration. So we will know that always when we are starting the call, by the end of the call, it still will be valid. But if you don't need to use on the end of the call this token, so yeah, just make sure it will be very short and make sure the client is refreshing it once in a while.
It also probably means that for this to work properly, your server time should be synchronized pretty well, right?
Yeah,
so if you're off by, I don't know.
Yeah, don't forget the basics.
yeah. It's for sure. Anyway, it shouldn't be like seconds. I think, again, everything between minutes to 1 or 2 hours is reasonable. Anything else is already will give us some application problems or will be not secure enough.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the brothers have switched. Shlomi is now Nitzan, and Nitzan is now Shlomi.
Nitzan become beautiful.
They're interchangeable.
Do they do that often?
It's a redundancy thing.
They are in replicated mode.
Yeah. Never done with girls. Never done with girls.
Nitzan, you forgot to unmute your mic. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just saying, I feel like this would happen, and he was a bit talking.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that'll be that'll be the end of our JWT presentation. Let's give these guys a round of applause. That was awesome. That's some really new, cool, like authentication stuff.
Very helpful.